Not that long ago, I made a video about some really insane horror films, and I said there that I had come across a number of weird films that I didn't really have a place for anywhere else, and I have way more than I featured on that list, so here's some more. These are some of the stranger things that I just have in my collection, including one that a number of you guys have requested. So, get ready to get weird! Number 10. Let's kick this off with one that's a little less insane, but still insane. And it's 1990's I Bought a Vampire Motorcycle. It begins with an occult ritual that's interrupted by a motorcycle gang killing the cult members, but the leader survives and manages to place the evil into one of the nearby damaged bikes before dying. It then comes to life, so we already have our title vampire motorcycle. Now someone just has to buy it. Enter Naughty here, played by Neil Morrissey, British television mainstay. And this guy is the voice of Bob the Builder. And when he sees the bike for sale, a little damaged, he says, "Can we fix it?" "Yes, we can," and buys it, so the title is now complete. A tragedy soon befalls one of his friends, and soon after it seems like the bike has a life of its own. Things get weird when Naughty starts dreaming that his friend Buzzer is talking to him as a living poo, one that jumps into his mouth, and that biker gang from the beginning gets back involved. Just like a regular vampire, the motorcycle is vulnerable to both garlic and crucifixes, and this little chunk of wacky is an early film by Dirk Campbell, and pretty much right after this he'd dive headfirst into the world of kids TV and worked on a number of series, including one called Mopatop's Shop, and much later on the reboot of The Worst Witch that ran on Netflix. It's said that the idea from the movie came to them after watching a screening of The Evil Dead, and they wanted to make something that was equally a mixture of horror and over-the-top comedy. Although this one does have its own feel, it's not an Evil Dead ripoff by any stretch of the imagination, and the only thing that you can probably credit is the general tone of the thing. But I think even this leans more into direct comedy. It features a couple of interesting cameos in it, including Burke Kwok, most known for playing Kato in the Pink Panther movies, but also appeared in a couple of Bond films. And he's here as a Chinese restaurant owner and agreed to do the film with the one condition that he didn't have to say any dialogue. It also has got Anthony Daniels, a man whose voice you know, but maybe not so much his face, because this is the guy who plays C-3PO. But ultimately, outside of just the bonkers setup and title, it's not really that strange. I mean, sure, it's a movie about a motorbike that's also a vampire attacking people, so that's pretty nutty, but the plot itself sticks to a fairly straightforward narrative, and it's really fun, with some great transformation stuff as the bike embraces its full vampiric form. Number 9! Now, about as far away from that one as possible, like on the other side of the planet in the realm of insanity and even professionalism, is our next entry, 2023's Fish Piss. Yes, you heard me right. I said Fish Piss. That's the title of the movie. And with a title like that, what on earth could this one be about? Well, for starters, it gives you a solid 5-minute sequence of this guy driving trucks around, set to the tune of this pleasant little jangly little guitar. And it just goes and goes. But then it switches to this dude painting in a basement, and it looks like this was shot with a 1990s camcorder, or a filter was put on it to make it look that way. They watch a music video for a song called Broccoli Rock with a guy who I think is meant to be lip syncing, but it's obvious early on that he's not going to be able to do it, so he just sort of gives up. And yep, we get to see a good portion of it. But our painter guy's friend is mad that he's enjoying the song, so he sets him up to watch this guy warning about the dangers of vegetables. And we get to see that whole thing. But he's not just obsessed with broccoli. Nope, he also loves drinking fish piss. But he's told to only drink it when he's in a bind, and then he just guzzles the whole thing. This causes a weird hallucination complete with singing fish that makes him kill his friend. And what the hell is going on here? For as coherent and linear the vampire motorcycle was, this is just not. But then let's get weirder, right? He takes the body to dump in the lake, imagining the broccoli boy, and is attacked by a fish monster. Clearly a guy in a green morph suit and shorts and sneakers, and he offers to deliver more fish piss if he's delivered more human bodies. So yeah, it's strange, and also has commercials in the middle of it, and songs about how you shouldn't drink fish piss. And okay, I'm not sure that I needed a song to tell me that. And this is both written and directed by Stephen Reefsteck under what appears to be a pen name of Janice Click. And Stephen also plays the swamp creature and is a self-proclaimed master of the bizarre. It features a cameo and song from oddball musician and Tim and Eric regular David Lieb Hart, and it's claimed that paying him was most of the budget. And it is that previously mentioned song about not drinking fish piss. And yeah, it's odd. It's somewhat entertaining. And I'll admit that I had some fun watching it. But I will also say that this is absolutely not for everyone. But if you dig strange cinema with a surreal edge and crappy sense of humor, this may be for you. Number 8. Now for a movie that I've had in my roster for a couple of years now and just finally have a reason to talk about it, and it's 2005's Exterminator City. And this little ball of WTF starts with a woman being killed in a shower by some sort of robot. But then there's another robot, this one a cop, and this robot goes to jail where it sees weird meat globs, and I already have no clue what's going on. The killer robot is electrocuted, I guess, and it appears as if this is a whole city full of robots. But not everyone is metal, since there's also human women that the robot serial killer is murdering, and he used to be an exterminator, which I guess is where the title came from, and has the ability to access all of the sewer and subway schematics. It works his way through some victims, almost all of which are naked women, mostly adult film stars, but also some scream queens like Julie Strain, and also hallucinates that hunting trophies are talking to him. Our hard-boiled RoboCop teams up with a psychiatrist to take him down, leading to quite a bit of insanity and a hilarious sword fight. Which is kind of, I guess, the sort of sword fight that you would expect from a couple of robots. But holy crap is this weird. It's from Clive Cohen, who both wrote and directed it, and it's his only film work. I really wasn't able to find much information about the man himself online, and no interviews with him or anything, but I did find a review in which him or someone claiming to be him was threatening to sue over a derogatory comment the writer had made about his character. But this one is strange because it's set in a city where people are robots. Every character that we encounter in this movie is a robot puppet of some sort. Except, and this is a very important except the victims of the serial killer that are always naked human women with implants. And, oh, that roster includes Brink Stevens, who doesn't have implants, but I guess gets shot with an RPG. But, again, this is a big but, those women are never seen in the same frame as any of the robots. They are exclusively seen on their own reacting to the killer, who I guess is just out of frame. But also, they make it somewhat clear that the robots exist in some sort of futuristic society. There's flying cars and like those weird buildings, and stuff seems to be set up to accommodate bots, but it's always dark and rainy outside. But every shot with one of the victims in it just is like in a regular modern looking house with modern stuff behind them and sun pouring in the windows. But there's something to be said for this, considering it looks to have been made with an extremely small crew. And I go so far as to say that Clive may have handled the vast majority of this on his own, considering about 80% of the shots are just medium shots of robot heads, and all of the shots featuring any humans in them are just them on their own. And this was clearly one of those passion projects, but I don't know, perhaps just a touch misguided one? Number 7. Okay, I have no idea how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to try to discuss 2015's When Blackbirds Fly. It's animated, but like, kind of? It has Daryl and his wife Norma, and they're hoping for a child. They're also living in heaven and are finally allowed to give birth, so a ceremony is commenced, and their society is ruled over by someone named Cain. Their ceremony consists of being fed some sort of object and then taken to select a worm baby, puke into a plant, and then it becomes a child named Marius. He's sent to school where he's taught about the evil one, something that lives on the other side of a wall that only Cain can keep away. One day, Marius and his friend see an injured talking cat on the other side of the wall, and when they rescue it, it gives them a fruit that allows them to see things differently, and they go off to meet the evil one and learn the truth about heaven. And if what I've described so far sounds pretty nuts, then what comes after this is so strange that Charlie Kaufman saw it and said, well, this doesn't make any sense. And this one was dreamed up by Jimmy Screamer Claus of the New Orleans Screamer Clauses, and he's both a composer and an animator. And this is a sort of a follow-up to his film Where the Dead Go to Die. And whereas that film was an anthology that was more horror-oriented, this is a surreal horror fantasy with some pretty overt religious themes, or anti-religious themes, or maybe, I don't know, both. There's some interesting cameos here, since Cain is voiced by Brandon Slagle, a fellow horror director who did 2019's The Dawn, as well as the Black Dahlia Haunting. Actress Devani Penn is there also as the evil one, and Adam Brooks, part of the Astron 6 crew and director of Father's Day and the editor, is credited as various voices. It's a really strange watch, probably not the easiest thing to get through if you're not a fan of the simple animation, particularly since this one is over 2 hours long, and it's certainly something that you would categorize as art house, but it's definitely insane and somewhat disturbing. Number 6! Hey, speaking of disturbing, let's now go to 2020's Evil Twins, with evil spelled with a U and with a Z on the end. And oh man, this one. It starts with a birth scene, and it's twins, and then jumps ahead 30 years, and the boys are now fully grown. And there are these two rather gluttonous fellows you see here. They sit around on their couch in their underwear and just eat all the time and constantly swear at each other, and watch porn of a woman eating and spilling food on herself. And yeah, right about now, you're really wondering what the hell you signed up for, because that woman also begins vomiting on herself. And then there's some simulated scat stuff. And don't worry, I'm not going to even attempt to show you anything here. Very little of this would really be considered safe for YouTube. But the boys realize that they're out of their meds, and they decide that they should try killing someone and eating them, and then describe what they would do for several minutes. And keep in mind, this is around 10 minutes into the movie, and all you've done so far is watch two hefty guys sit on a couch and eat and watch porn. Their first victim is a hooker, and she's played by a woman named Mercedes, who is also the writer and director of this, and is somewhat well known in the underground film world, particularly in the realm of trauma. The brothers are soon a media sensation and are out on the street in matching white outfits like grocer Andrew WK's. It's pretty clear that there was no script involved, and the boys were just told to improv whatever. And just when you think that it's at its grossest, when you have these guys in their tidy whities in the kitchen cooking up human flesh and eating it in close-up, the movie then decides to one-up you by then having a scene with them in their bathroom, panties around their ankles, and just way too much poop for one movie. And yeah, it's gross. There's very, and I mean very little plot going on here, as it's just these two wandering around from gross out moment to gross out moment, and it's insane. The very definition of it. And it's more or less an endurance test and very, very tough to get through. It has the added bit that it seems like Mario Cotta-Becerra, who plays the mohawked Jack in the film, died in between the completion of filming and the eventual release. After the credits, there's a short tribute to him, including some home video, which is a far nicer way to remember the guy than the movie that came before it. Oh, and do you want to know how gross this all gets? The end credits play out as the boys get sick from their human feast and puke all over their kitchen floor, and the names for the credits show up in their vomit. I did not make that up. That is something that happens in this movie. Number 5. After that last one, you would think that I would want to stay away from anything with the word gut in the title, but what the hell. We're doing it, and we're looking at 2017's Gut Boy, A Bad Time Story. It opens with puppets on stage introducing our tale, which is also told through puppets, marionettes actually, and a young fisherman is approached by an older man who wants his pole, the fishing pole that is, and it ends up making him a deal for his skin. Gut Boy then catches a mermaid who promises to grant him a wish, and he wishes to marry Sophia, the policeman's daughter. He's then swindled out of his pole by Besto and swears revenge. Now, here's where it gets even weirder, because Besto has two giants in his employ, and for them, they use full-size actors with gold paint on that wrestle each other. And meanwhile, when we meet Sophia, she gets a musical number. There's a lengthy backstory explaining Sophia's true tale, and it turns out that her skin was also stolen by Besto and wrapped around another form. But the real Sophia is actually the mermaid, and she realizes that Gut Boy is actually in love with her, or at least her skin, and yeah, this is bizarre, but it's also really charming. It's both written and directed by Nick Grant, and it looks like he was very involved in the infomercial world before making this, and also runs cameras for some TV productions. The puppets were all created by Daniel Patrick Fay, who also serves as the lead puppeteer, and he's actually a touring artist with a background in puppetry, but this seems like his biggest film work to date. Oddly enough, probably the most tenured crew member is Cormac Bluestone, who handled all the music and the score for the film, and he has a solid background in film and TV, and is the composer for the music for the It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia musical, The Night Man Cometh. Even though this one was released by Troma, it's not exactly the type of thing that you'd expect from them. To be honest, it's not the type of thing that you'd expect from anyone, really. It's this weird little labor of love that has a lot going for it, and a bunch of heart, and it's certainly worth a watch, and it's definitely kind of weird. Number 4. I feel like I always have to get an international film in here somewhere, especially considering the extremely insane nature of some of the old Hong Kong films and the Japanese weird stuff. And this time around, I went with 1991's 964 Pinocchio. It starts in black and white with flashing imagery of a man being electrocuted, people having sex, and some sort of surgery. We meet a young woman named Himiko, a homeless girl who makes maps of the city, and she encounters this lost man wearing all white with an unusual hairstyle. She takes him in, and his story may not be so weird by this point, but the way it's shot is. Everything is done in these long takes with a hypnotic tone underneath, with a dreamlike atmosphere. Himiko sees that his name is 964 Pinocchio and decides to teach him Japanese. And I guess it's story time with this one. You see, like 100 years ago, I used to trade tapes. I was friends with this guy in Boston who liked Asian films and Hong Kong action and anime and all that stuff. I also had a buddy in Texas who was super into horror films and had all these bootlegs of rare stuff and things that were really hard to find. These two guys never met each other, but they were both interested in the stuff the other guy had. I guess I could have sent them each other's info so they could just trade stuff back and forth, but I wanted movies too. So I would simply tell Boston what Texas was interested in, and he would send it to me. I'd then make copies for myself and send them to Texas, and then he'd send back a couple that Boston wanted. So those two got the movies that they wanted to see, and I would score myself copies of everything. So my collection became huge. This was one of those movies, but it didn't have any subtitles, and I couldn't speak Japanese, so I just had to watch this movie and try to figure out what the hell was happening. And as you can probably tell, that was impossible. Much later, I was able to view a subbed copy online and see the story and stuff, and I'll be honest, it doesn't do much to illuminate anything, but it turns out that Pinocchio is a sex bot, but he's defective and can't keep it up, so he's tossed onto the street where Himiko finds him. And right when you think, hey, maybe that's weird enough, Pino essentially melts down into a gooey yellow substance, while Himiko freaks out in the creepiest way. And sadly, you'd think that I would have a vomit break after Evil Twins, but no! This movie has an extended yakking scene as well. This one also has a sort of prequel with a movie called Rubber's Lover, although it's more of a thematic follow-up than an actual part of the story. And it's interesting. Weirdly, I think I appreciated this one more when I couldn't understand what was going on in the story and was just along for the wacky, weird ride. If you want a movie, you're probably not going to want to mess with this one. But if you're in the mood for surreal, experimental, cyberpunk shenanigans, just go grab it. Number 3. Let's head back to the US now for a little slice of insanity known as 2011's The Oregonian. And let me read you the IMDb synopsis for this one, because all it says is, a woman leaves the farm and enters the unknown. And after watching this movie, accurate. That woman in question is played by Lindsay Pulsifer, who has been in a large number of TV shows, including a decent stint on True Blood, and she packs up and leaves either her drunken dad or husband one day and gets into a car wreck. Afterwards, she's bombarded with a loud sound and white light, and it turns out that she hit some people and killed them, so she heads off on foot to find help. The first person she encounters is this creepy old lady in red, and then continues on, having another disturbing encounter with her and a crashed car, driven by someone in a full-body frog costume. Her adventures get more and more bizarre as she returns to the farm, but there's no one around, and she gets picked up by a heavy-breathing man in a van because, as our parents always said, the safest place to be is in the van of a bearded dude who breathes like he has sleep apnea. Oh, and pees blood. And then it just gets more and more hallucinogenic, and the proceeds make less and less sense, but they're kind of pretty and also kind of creepy. But then there's also a scene in which several of the characters are spitting up blood, and I'm counting that as vomit, so there's a definite theme in this list of people throwing up. And this is one of those movies where I'm like, I'm not sure what's happening, and I'm not 100% convinced that the filmmakers had a plan or if they just were all about making a trippy film with dark visuals and some horror vibes with no real clear path. I guess we'd have to ask Calvin Reeder about it, since he both wrote and directed it, and he's also an actor and is one of the guys in VHS who's breaking into the house to look for the tapes. It actually got a pretty highbrow release and premiered at Sundance Film Festival and even got a small theatrical run, although the reviews were a bit unpredictable. Some people called it an incomprehensible mess with no set message, but others enjoyed the vibe and mood that it created. And I kind of like it. I mean, it's not the kind of thing I put on and just sit and think about, but it's a cool movie to just have going and enjoy the visuals it's throwing at you and the dreamy tone. Number 2. Getting near the ending of this absurd journey, and now we're going into 2021's Chompy and the Girls, a movie I saw a while back and just adored, and I figured would fit this list quite well. It has Jackson here, and she's having some dark thoughts, and when she has no one else to turn to, she reaches out to her father, Sam. Problem is, Sam doesn't know she exists since her mom never told him about her. Their first meeting doesn't go all that well, but before they can leave, they spot a man with a gigantic mouth swallowing a young girl whole. They get away, but later that night, the Chompy man shows up at Jackson's place and tries to eat her, so she gets Sam and they try to figure out what's going on and grab her friend Lotus. Now, Lotus is a drug dealer and he ingests a roofie and he pukes in the car, but you don't see it, so our theme is broken here, although I guess he technically throws up, but like unlike the other films, you don't see it. Thank you. The mystery unfolds as they find the little girl that they saw get swallowed earlier just walking on the side of the road, and things get even stranger when Sam takes off his boot to discover that he now has a baby foot. But here's the thing, this is the setup, and sure, a lot of that sounds fairly strange, but about halfway through this movie, it takes a massive left turn and sort of becomes something else. Something involving Udo Kier, or at least his voice. And this is the debut feature of Sky Brabrand, and it's a pretty good start. Sure, it's a little clunky at times and could certainly move a little quicker at points, but it's a really fun film with some great character work, and the most interesting aspect is that even though it's very strange and a little surreal at times, it also never stops becoming accessible. It's a fairly commercial way to tell a really outlandish story. And I really enjoy it. It probably veers more into sci-fi than it does horror, but it's also about a guy named Chompy who straight up swallows people whole. So there is that. But yeah, check this one out. Number 1. Our final film on this roster is one that plenty of people have requested me to cover in the past for one list or another, and I figured that this was the right time to bring up 2010's Rubber. It's insane right from the get-go with a car driving down a dirt road, making sure to hit into a number of chairs that have been set up along the way, only for a police officer to then exit the trunk and directly address the audience to discuss filmmaking. That's the opening 3 minutes. That's how this starts. There's then a crowd of people here, all with binoculars, watching events unfold, expecting a story, like a film audience. Then we begin the main attraction of ridiculous as a tire comes to life and moves on its own, and discovers that it can crush things. But when it encounters something it can't crush, something even more bizarre happens. It telekinetically destroys it. Greendale's Neil is one of the onlookers, as is the scanner cop, and the tire next takes out a bunny rabbit, and then a crow. Raven? I can't tell the difference. Can anyone? But when a careless truck driver hits him, he follows in order to get revenge. And hey, remember when I said Scanner Cop was there? Well, this movie should look familiar to him, because things take a turn when the tire takes a liking to a young woman that it finds. But there's also the guy with a turkey in his hotel room. And here's the thing, even though the guy in this opening flat out told us that this movie is about no reason, it's clear from the whole meta aspect of the audience watching the events that there's clearly a greater message to all of this. It's a movie about movies and the way that we watch them and rationalize things. I've built an entire channel out of it and have a whole series called Unanswered Questions where I try to devise reason behind things that were clearly just written in a film to be in there. But that kind of ignores the audience experience, and it's something that this film treats a little reductively. Much to the chagrin of artists everywhere, the audience has a right to experience the work of art in whatever way they choose. Some like to experience things at face value, while others like to look a little deeper. But here's the catch, sometimes there is no deeper. Sometimes it is only face value, and that's what this film is trying to represent. I'm not really into all that, though. I don't care if a film is meant to only be seen as face value. As the viewer, I like to look for more. And if it's not there, I enjoy coming up with my own. And based on the views for Unanswered Questions videos, you guys enjoy it too. And anyway, this one is both written and directed by Quentin Dupieux, and he's kind of made a name for himself as a connoisseur of the surreal with films like this and Wrong Cops, and also Wrong, and the more recent Smoking Causes Coughing. But this is probably his most attention-getting production. And it also played at cons, where it got great reviews and was picked up for distribution. And yeah, if you haven't seen this one already, then it's worth the watch. It's definitely extremely strange and odd, but it's also inherently watchable. It's not like some inaccessible art house head scratcher. And besides, it's a film about a psychokinetic killer tire. Why would you not want to see that? So there you have it, 10 more really weird movies, just strange right out the gate. And the majority of these are very watchable and very fun. There's only probably maybe one or two that I'd be like, don't watch that. But for the most part, these were, I don't know, a good time. I enjoyed most of these. Definitely not Evil Twins. Too gross for me. But yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in here to enjoy. Let me know if you've seen any of these, heard any of these, enjoy these. I know you've seen Rubber. Most people have seen Rubber. That one is probably the most popular one on here. Let me know if any of the other ones strike your fancy. Tell me that in the comments below. I'd love to hear that. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, hit subscribe if you enjoy the channel, and also go to my Patreon page at patreon.com/movietimelines. I'd appreciate that. But otherwise, keep on coming back and checking out these channels because there's another great video coming your way very, very soon. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye-bye.